A few more juicy insights into how Be'lakor is going to function today, some nice previews of his Noctic Discipline, a little insight as to how his arm is going to work, and a potentially useful stratagem to get him out of harm's way. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today we're looking at Games Workshop's new Warhammer community preview, talking about Be'lakor's buffing abilities, psychic powers, and a new stratagem. His rules are going to be coming out in that new Warzone Charadon Book of Fire expansion. We already know the vast majority of the rules as to Be'lakor himself, but it's interesting to see a fair few little extras. So just to quickly recap, Be'lakor's looking like a very scary model for Chaos Demons, a 360 point model, most likely a Supreme Commander, a hefty stat line with a 12-inch movement and fly, weapon skill and ballistic skill 2+, strength 8, toughness 7, 16 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 9 and a 4+ invul. He's going to be properly annoying to remove at range, he's always -1 to hit, you're never allowed to re-roll any hit rolls against him, so that'll shut down a lot of aura buffs, and he's -1 to wound at range as well, again that'll really fox anything but the heaviest firepower weapons from gunning him down. In melee he'll give you a good stabbing with the Blade of Shadows, it's strength 12, AP -4, a big damage D3+3, and on top of that invulnerable saves can't be made against this weapon. He is pretty much the ultimate character and heavy hunter. No invul saves and AP -4 means that you're near guaranteed an absolute ton of damage. So that's the stuff that we already know, but the first part that they revealed today are some of his buffing abilities. He'll be able to cast 2 psychic powers from his Noctic Discipline, and we'll go over the ones that they previewed from that in a second. His Warlord trait is a command ability, it's called Shadow Lord, and it's the only one that he can take if he is your Warlord. You select one Disciples of Be'lakor unit, excluding vehicle units within 9 inches of Be'lakor, and until the start of your next command phase, every time a model in that unit makes an attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. So basically Chapter Master style re-rolls applied to a Disciples of Be'lakor unit, which seems pretty obvious that that's the keyword that you're going to get from this new Legion of Night. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what units can be included in the Legion of Night and which ones can't. As we know it's going to be mixing mortal followers and demons all under Be'lakor's command, it seems likely that at the very least we'll get most basic demon units, and at least a lot of the core Chaos Space Marine units, things like standard Chaos Space Marines, Terminators, Possessed and a few others. I don't know whether we're going to be getting literally every single unit out of both Demons and Chaos Codexes. I am hopeful that it could be a good way to play Chaos, and it's going to be interesting weighing up the strengths and negatives of the various things that they already get. I wonder if Be'lakor will have the Disciples of Be'lakor keyword himself, as that would allow him to benefit from his own buffs like this, and allow him to re-roll his failed hits. In any case, it seems like it could be really useful virtually wherever it's applied, certainly to units like, say, Chaos Terminators, or maybe Obliterators if they're allowed, or maybe even just to a whole ton of Bloodletters or something in Chaos Demons. His other aura ability is the Dark Master, which is kind of unchanged from his old datasheet. When any friendly demon or Disciples of Be'lakor unit, excluding vehicle units, is within 6 inches of him, you get to re-roll hit rolls of 1 with their attacks. It's kind of interesting that that applies just flatly to all demon units, whether or not they're Disciples of Be'lakor. So it should work with anything with the demon keyword, say things like Chaos Possessed if you're not in the same detachment, or any demons of any god, much in the same way that a standard demon prince would allow you to re-roll hit rolls of 1 for their own god-specific demons. Pretty handy to have around, and maybe could be a draw to fielding an allied Be'lakor, even outside of his special Army of Renown formation. Moving on, we of course have this Noctic Discipline. We've got 3 powers previewed here. I think it's likely that there will be 6 powers in the discipline. In the previous Charadon book, the Death Guard got their own Psychic Discipline within that Terminus Est Strike Force, so it seems pretty likely that they'll get the same deal, another 6 powers handed out. The ones that we've seen previewed are 2 fairly underwhelming Mortal Wound powers, and Wreathed in Shades, an ability that should make it very hard for your opponent to shoot at you. I'm hoping that other Psykers aside from Be'lakor himself will have access to this. I can see it being taken by things like Chaos Sorcerers too. In any case, the first of the powers is Void Slivers, Warp Charge 5, a 12-inch range Witchfire, and it's one of these slightly underwhelming, sort of like lance attack effects. You nominate one enemy model, you draw a line between yourself and that model. The model's unit takes 1 mortal wound, or D3 mortal wounds if there is 11 or more models in the unit, and for each other enemy unit that the line passes over or through, they take 1 mortal wound, or D3 mortal wounds if there's 11 or more models there. I think it's a bit rubbish to be honest. Even if the stars align and you manage to spear 3 models in the same attack, it's only a little bit better than Smite, and I'm sure there's going to be other stronger options than this. The next one I like a little bit more is Betraying Shades. This is a Warp Charge 6 Witchfire, 18-inch range, and I must admit the fluff behind it is quite fun. Basically the very shadows of the enemies rise up and claw their owners to bits. I can imagine that that will be quite unsettling. Most people are rather attached to their shadows and will struggle to get away from them even if they really try. In any case, in-game it's an ability that favours targeting models with a whole bunch of attacks. It's a bit of a strange mechanic to be honest. You select 6 models within the unit, you combine the total number of all their attacks put together. Say for example, if you chose a unit of Space Marine Intercessors, you might choose the Sergeant and 5 regular Intercessors, and that will be a total of 13 attacks. You then roll a dice for every one of those numbers. On a 6+ it causes 1 mortal wound, but that improves to a 5+ if you cast it on an 11 or more. Kind of depends on the target for this attack. Ideally you want a unit that's got at least 6 models in, but all of those models have tons of attacks too. I think usually it's going to be an average of 1 to 2 mortal wounds, besides in truly optimal circumstances, and seems okay as a Witchfire, though not desperately better than Smite. Again, I would at least have hope for the rest of the discipline that there might also be something stronger than it. Finally, and my favourite out of these 3 previewed powers, is Wreathed in Shades. This one's a Warp Charge 7 power, and it affects a Disciples of Be'lakor unit within 12 inches, but it can't be used on vehicles or monsters. The unit that you bestow this on can't be shot unless it's the closest visible model, or the enemy units manage to close to within 12-inch range of them. Provided you've got some sort of durable chaff units in the midfield, this essentially grants you immunity from shooting from long-range guns, and that seems like it could be a really handy buff to hand out, particularly on a stronger chaos shooting unit. Maybe something like Noise Marines or Obliterators could be an optimal target if they can become Disciples of Be'lakor. Being able to have some truly powerful guns in the midfield that the opponent just can't target is really nice, and I feel like this is likely to see play, particularly if you can take it on regular sorcerers and things. Finally, I'm sure this Legion of Night will have a fair few of its own stratagems. Most of the armies of renown seem to have at least 4, but this one's called the Blessing of Be'lakor, and it's essentially a 2 command point get out of jail free card, where when you fail a saving throw, the damage of that attack turns into 0. It's kind of a bit similar to say having a command point reroll to reroll the save, except of course you don't just get to reroll the save, this just automatically happens. So it costs 2 command points, but you're guaranteed to take no damage whatsoever. Again, provided this can be used on Be'lakor himself, which Warhammer community basically said that it could be, which certainly will imply that he has the Disciples of Be'lakor keyword, then I think that this will be highest value on Be'lakor himself. Basically every wound that your opponent puts on Be'lakor will have been achieved at enormous cost. You already have -1 to hit, you can't reroll hits against him, you're -1 to wound at range, and he's got to fail a good invul. Say if your opponent's trying to gun him down with something like Dark Lances or Twin Cognis Las Cannons, typically you're going to have to fire 8 of the things at him for him just to fail 1 save. If you can then turn that big D3+3 damage into 0 damage for 2 CP, you're potentially frustrating an entire ton of the enemy shooting, and it could even act as a deterrent so you don't fire some really big high damage weapons at Be'lakor in the first place. On top of that, you could also command reroll a save as well, meaning that Be'lakor is just going to be insanely durable. Between all his innate buffs and a couple of stratagems to boost his durability when needed, it's near enough guarantees he's not going to get gunned down before getting into melee. Certainly pretty nice to have in the bag of tricks, maybe a tiny bit expensive at 2 command points, but I can see that easily being worth it if Be'lakor fails a save, and it might make the difference between him living and dying. So overall, plenty of really quite strong stuff for the Dark Master here. I'll certainly be reviewing his rules in full and the rules for his army in renown whenever we get them, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics has a Patreon page, where if you've been enjoying a lot of the videos lately, you can help to support the creation of new ones if you'd like to. Channel patrons do get a fair few perks, seeing certain videos earlier than anyone else, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.